Speaking of DraftKings, joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, Julian Edlow, as you see him live in the virtual flesh on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Julian, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you, Josh?
Doing pretty good. Obviously the NBA is getting ready to resume here, and I got to ask you, now that the All-Star game is done, now that it's all out of the way, aside from the obvious, about the MVP races and all that kind of stuff, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to as the NBA season resumes? Because I feel like it's almost going to fly under the radar a little bit initially because with college basketball on right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, conference tournament week. I think a lot of eyes are on that. Selection Sunday coming up in the tournament, and we got robbed of it last year. The NBA resumed. College basketball didn't. So it's exciting to have the first tournament in a couple of years, and a lot of eyes are on that, including mine. I'm excited for the college hoops. But I think the NBA getting back into the swing of things, it's a different second half than usual. Normally we come out of the All-Star break, and, it's the second half, quote unquote. It's more of a quarter of a season, really, or closer to it, or a third at least. And you know who the good teams are. We're coming down the stretch. This time around, we have more games in the second half. Teams have to make up all those postponements, play a lot of back-to-backs, things of that nature. You have teams like the Knicks, who are deep in the Eastern Conference playoff picture with a 4 seed. Odds-wise, they are still favored at most books to miss the postseason. You've got teams like the Warriors sitting in a 9 seed that most believe will be in the postseason. So I just think it's going to be, normally coming out of the break, it's like, all right, here's what's going to happen. We're going to play the rest of the regular season out and get to the playoffs. Whereas now we still have some serious things in terms of the standings to decide who the good and bad teams are, and getting through the most difficult portion of the schedule.
Now, you mentioned difficult parts of the schedule. We know that some of these teams had to make up games as well in the second half, and I got to wonder, some of these teams are going to run out of steam, right? I mean, I'm looking at some of these teams that lost games, chunks of games for some of them, not just for COVID. For look at the teams in Texas, they lost games because of the storm that went through there. So some of these teams, you got to wonder as you're going through whether you're jumping on DraftKings, the sports book to drop a bet, or maybe you're jumping on the DFS lineups and you're thinking, maybe the Mavericks or these other teams, they might be a little bit more tired than some of these other teams are playing against.
It's going to be a narrative in the second half that we've never really seen before. You're going to want to look at back-to-back numbers in terms of teams against the spread on the second night of a back-to-back. Luka Doncic in general, I know, just point prop-wise, his production has been worse. He shoots worse when playing on the second night of a back-to-back, and he's obviously a big piece of what Dallas does. And Dallas has a lot of games to make up. So pieces are going to fall into place, trends that, looking at numbers against the spread on the second night of a back-to-back or off a loss or whatever, that's normal handicapping in the NBA. But I think it's going to be even more important this season, and we're going to have larger sample sizes of it this season given the state of the NBA. So, yeah, I think there are some teams that, like I said off the top, the standings are generally the standings at this point, and they mix around a little bit. There's some 8-9 seed battles that will go on or whatever. But this year, I think things have some potential for major shakeup, and paying attention, getting in early on trends, identifying those trends of how teams are playing when the schedule gets tough, whatever, 5 games in 7 nights type of deal, is going to be pretty valuable information. And especially with teams knowing this year that the top 6 are in, and 7 through 10, you have that play-in round again, is going to make things a little bit different.
Julian Edlow joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Go. Follow Julian on Twitter at Julian Edlow. DraftKings covers the NBA and more. You can follow all of his content at Julian Edlow on Twitter. You mentioned trends. One of the trends that I've noticed, Julian, a lot is that there's a lot more teams hitting the overs than usual this year. I don't know if that's just because defense is down, but it feels like there's a lot of teams that just constantly keep hitting the over. Like the Kings have a garbage for defense, basically, for example. Some of these teams, they just don't seem to be able to stop anybody when it comes to playing defense. And I feel like that's one of the trends I've seen. What are some of the trends as well you've seen?
Yeah, I don't bet as much in terms of the over-unders or totals. I'm more picking sides. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the Kings are 25-11 to the over. The best team in the NBA to the over has been the Pelicans at 26-10, and they really picked up steam going into the All-Star break. I think they were on like a 14-2 run to the over or something, and they've been a better bet at home in terms of betting totals. Brooklyn, especially when they have all three of those guys in the lineup, especially now integrating Blake Griffin coming out of the break into that lineup, they're the third best over/under team at 25-12 to the over. I think they're a team that shouldn't really slow down. For me, we get one tonight on Wednesday. The Wizards are 8-3 straight up in their last 11 games, 9-2 against the spread. They're playing in Memphis as an underdog. They've been tremendous in this role. They were a team at the start of the season that we maybe thought with getting Westbrook and having Beal healthy in there could be a 7-8 seed in the East, sneak into the playoff picture. They look terrible out of the gates, same old Wizards, and now they're a hot team and they have some talent. So I think they're a team to look at out of the break. And really, I have an NBA Trends article that I put up on the DraftKings playbook. I try to get it up Monday through Friday. It'll be up a little bit less during March Madness just because a lot of my focus will be there. But there is one for tonight's 2-game slate. It just identifies certain trends for teams. None of these ones out of these 4 teams had too strong of first quarter numbers. But you've got a team like the Spurs, 12-1 against the first half spread on the road this season. They're +2 in Dallas. I think one of the things that I find interesting is, you have a spread. Let's call it this Dallas-San Antonio game. The spread's 4. That means that the first half spread is going to be 2, most likely. It could be 2.5, it could be 1.5. That means the first quarter spread is going to be about 1. It's broken down based off the full game spread, but doesn't necessarily take into account, is this a fast starting team? And the Spurs on the road have been a fast starting team. So when you can find, Dallas has been kind of a coin flip, so it's not necessarily strong on the other side. But if you can find that trend against a team that, gets off to slow starts, I like looking at the first half, first quarter, rather than the full game and playing some of these trends and, kind of shortening the game based on how teams come out of the gates.
Julian, let's dig deeper into some of the teams around the NBA specifically. I know you got some Boston gear behind you, so I want to ask you about Boston first. I feel like every time I watch Boston, people want to say, is Brad Stevens on the hot seat and all that stuff. But to me, if I got to blame anybody for Boston, it's got to be the GM. I mean, when Pritchard is one of your best players on the team outside of Tatum and Brown some nights, I got to blame the GM for not building this roster properly, because I feel like there are nights that Tatum and Brown are having phenomenal games, especially if you're a fantasy guy, you're playing fantasy sports, Tatum and Brown, you're in love, while the rest of the team is doing a lot of nothing at times.
Yeah, the Celtics have had, I guess, a tough go, I'll say, at the beginning of the year, with Kemba not being ready for about a month. Then he can't play the back-to-backs, still can't play the back-to-backs. Marcus Smart goes out with the calf injury. He's been out since the end of January. It actually looks like, according to Shams Charania, Marcus Smart is cleared to go on Thursday against Brooklyn. So that's a start for things for the Celtics. But Brown and Tatum have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they haven't quite adjusted or been ready to quite take on that large of a role, as good as both of them have been and deserving all-stars, I would say. Brad Stevens is at some fault. I think he could do a better job, but I don't think he's had much in front of him to necessarily work with. I don't think there's a better alternative. I don't think firing Brad Stevens makes the Boston Celtics better.
Right.
So could he be better? Yes. Are you becoming better by firing him? No. I do place the larger portion of the blame, I would say, on the general manager, Danny Ainge. Every year, the Celtics are loaded with assets. It's a big topic of discussion here in Boston, and a trade never really comes through. Now, could the Kyrie Irving trade have worked out better? Certainly. That didn't go as expected. Even the Kemba Walker trade hasn't been the success that you maybe thought it would be so far. So they're taking some chances in the offseason, but I think in season, dumping off some of these picks that have wound up being meaningless, using assets to improve, using this now TBE that you got for Gordon Hayward. I don't know what you're going to find for it that would have been better than taking Miles Turner and Doug McDermott off of Indiana's hands. I think that was a mistake, no matter what you use the TBE on if you're Boston. But you better get something for it, because you passed on a good starting center and a good bench scorer to get this exception for Gordon Hayward. So you better get something for it. Otherwise, that's a very poor move.
The other couple teams that are in the Eastern Conference that also people have a lot of eyes on. Everyone wants to talk about the Sixers. Everyone talks about the Nets. From your perspective, I know that everyone believes, and the betting odds are that the Nets are the favorite in the Eastern Conference. But how close or how much of a gap is there from the Nets to the Sixers or the Nets to the Bucks and so on and so forth?
Once things get kicked up to playoff time, I think that we're going to learn, assuming Brooklyn is healthy, that it's a pretty large gap. I really feel that way. I think that this is pretty much Warriors or better type talent that the Nets have. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. He was the main piece in Golden State. He's the main piece here. But when healthy, he doesn't look like he's really lost much. The key is going to be playing the games. In the regular season, they're resting these guys, giving them as much time as they need to get back from injuries. Kyrie's taken personal days for 2 weeks and not coming back. That's not going to happen in the playoffs. I just think when those three guys work it in together, and Blake Griffin, by the numbers, has been one of the most inefficient players in the NBA. That's on the Detroit Pistons. I think given 20 to 25 minutes with his buddy DeAndre Jordan on the floor and those three wings, I think it's going to look a lot different. Blake Griffin doesn't have to be the above the rim player. He's a good passer. He can still do things that's gonna help you. Maybe Andre Drummond winds up in Brooklyn, I think, which would be a nice boost. There's just too much talent there. They'll figure it out on defense. On nights they don't figure it out on defense, they'll hang 135 on you and you'll lose that way. I just don't see one of these other teams being able to get 4 wins off of them when it really matters most.
Do you give any value to the rumors out there, the Sixers potentially getting a guy like a Kyle Lowry? How much would that shift or not shift your perspective on the Eastern Conference?
I don't necessarily know why or if Toronto would be ready to give up on a Kyle Lowry. Like they gave up on DeMar DeRozan, who was there forever. That was what got them Kawhi Leonard and got them a championship. I don't know if they necessarily need to blow things up from a Raptors perspective, but let's just say they do. From a 76ers standpoint, depending on what you give up, it helps a lot. If you've got Lowry on the floor with Curry, Simmons, Embiid, and Harris, that's a good 5. I don't think it's as good as Brooklyn's 5. I would still favor Brooklyn. And I still think Philly deserves to be probably second in the conference right now in terms of odds as things stand. So if they got Lowry, I guess it doesn't move them in terms of ranking 1, 2, 3. I think they're 2 now. I think they'd be 2 with Lowry, but I think the price would become a little bit different, tighten things up with Brooklyn, but Brooklyn still would be a relatively heavy favorite for me. I just think that type of talent, if it locks in the postseason, is not going to lose to anyone.
DraftKings Julian Edlow joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Julian Edlow on Twitter for all of his picks and analysis. You mentioned the college basketball scene. Before I let you go, I got to ask you about that. Listen, I was at Boardwalk Hall last night. It was a crazy game. I never thought that I would be excited about Fairfield versus Manhattan, but the game went to overtime, and it was a blast. It was amazing to watch college basketball in its purest form. Aside from the MAC, because nobody really cares about the MAC as much as the MAC does, but listen, look, there's a lot of interesting matchups in the conference tournaments this week. Are there any specific teams or conferences that you're focusing in on? I know a lot of people are looking at Duke. Can they make a run in the ACC? People are wondering about what's going to happen with the Big 12. What are your thoughts on the conferences this week and who are you watching closely?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be watching it all. I think that it's just fun for March to be here and, 11 a.m., noon, we got games that we can do something with. That's just fun. And it's more fun when you're on the right side of those games if you're betting them. So just being in March after not having it last year, I think is going to be great. I'll be looking at all the conferences in terms of where the firepower is. I just think the Big 10 and the Big 12 are absolutely loaded. Those are going to be amazing conference tournaments. You look at the Big 12, the 4-5 matchup is going to be West Virginia, Oklahoma State. That's a heavyweight battle right there, and the winner is going to go play Baylor, who deserves to be the odds-on favorite in that conference. Kansas has some COVID issues on the other side of the bracket. I think that makes the Texas Tech game all that much more important because I really like the winner of that game to defeat Kansas and go to the conference championship against Baylor. So if you want to bet like Texas or Texas Tech from a future standpoint, I think you're getting a good number now. And then you can kind of hedge out against Baylor in the championship game, assuming that you don't like them in that spot. And then you go to the Big Ten. Illinois just had as good a week as any team all season, I think, in college basketball. Road wins against Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio State. Michigan's still right up there, obviously. Ohio State is going to be a 2 seed. Those two before Illinois and Michigan, those are 1 seeds, and the conference is deep. So I think those two are going to be the best conference tournaments just in terms of having that like Final Four feeling when we kind of get down the line there to the weekend.
Of course, you get all the action with DraftKings, DFS, Sportsbook. It's all there. Julian Edlow has all the coverage right there. Follow him on Twitter at Julian Edlow. All of his coverage right there on Twitter. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Great stuff today, Julian. It's good to see you in the virtual flesh here.
Yeah, good to see you too, Josh. First time doing this on video. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I do like the fact that you have the little jersey. It's not prominently displayed, but it's like right there in the bottom. Kind of right hand, just to let you know it's there, kind of thing.
I gotta get that one up on the wall. Game worn, Reggie Lewis.
There you go. I like it. It's a nice pull by you. Good job, man.
Thanks.
Julian Edlow, as all guests appear on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Have a good one, man. Can catch you later.
All right, you too. Thanks, Josh.